Hello, I hope you are having a wonderful evening. It is Wednesday. Um, and I wanted to come on to talk about something that's come up several times. So it came up in one of the comment sections, and then it came up in two different one on one calls with clients today. And it was on the topic of mom guilt and the things that we feel guilty for, and how we interpret that sensation in our body, and usually kind of just stop there. And so the way that I see guilt, the just like any other feeling, guilt is there with a message. All of our feelings have a message to deliver to us. So guilt in particular, the message guilt is trying to send is, whoa, hold on. Something you're doing is not in alignment with your goals and values. Heads up, right? So what we usually do is we take the feeling of guilt and we translate that into shame. I'm a terrible mom. I'm failing. I'm the worst, right? Those like overarching labels. Then we feel like dog poopy. And then we act our worst because we feel like crap, right? Like that's how all of us really function. When we feel terrible, we act terrible. Um, and sometimes it's subtle, right? Sometimes it's just sitting there in your head, so dissociated from the here and now present moment with your kid, that was all set off by this shame spiral because you felt guilty about something you didn't need to feel guilty about. So how do you know? Like, if guilt has a message to give you, then sometimes it's functional and there's a reason for it. That is the litmus test. So you ask the question, like, okay, hey guilt, welcome aboard. What is your message? What precisely did I do that was out of alignment with my goals or values? Or morals or religion or whatever things matter to you, right? Like it can be any of those things. Something was out of alignment. Guilt is there to go, psst, get back on the path, right? But if there's not an answer, then it's not guilt. It is either shame or it's grief. And in all of the cases today, it was grief. There is a difference between I wish this could be different and I am grieving that it is not, versus I should have made this different. Could that be true? Sure, sometimes. But in all of the cases today, which is just one day, right? It's definitely a biased sample pool. But in all of the cases today, the outcome that was not desired was never actually in that mom's hands to control. So your kid, you find out that your kid is unwell in some way. There's a diagnosis involved, some sort of sickness, some sort of something. And you feel so much guilt. That wasn't for you to control. You go back to your values. What are your values? To believe your child. Did you believe them when they said they weren't well? It seems like it because you took them to the doctor. Did you get them appropriate support and attention? Seems like it because you took them to the doctor. Are you now able to empathize with their distress or frustration? Are you now able to take in that new information and make new decisions going forward that honor the new information you received about your child's health? So where's the guilt? The guilt would say you did something wrong. You cannot control whether your kid happens to get a thing. That's not something that you have the power to control. You have the power to respond. You have the power to take each day as the new information comes in and pivot and shift and make decisions that support your children. And you're doing that. So you're doing your job. You're in alignment with your values. It's not really guilt. You're used to feeling guilt. What that is grief. And you are allowed to grieve. in fact you need to grieve to be a whole and healthy human. There is an abundance of things in the world that are not there, that feel overwhelming, that suck, right? And we are allowed to grieve those things. We are allowed to say simply, I don't like it. I wish it was something else. And that doesn't mean that we don't like our kid. That doesn't mean that we are ungrateful for the positive things in our life. It means this one thing that is out of my control turned out in a way that I do not enjoy. I'm allowed to not like that. I am allowed to feel however I feel. And I'm allowed to grieve the reality that is versus the reality that I wished it would have been. And when we grieve, we go through this process, right? We have anger, we have denial and bargaining, we have sadness, and then we have acceptance. We have to let ourselves move through that whole spectrum, and sometimes you kind of bounce around before you reach acceptance. That is supposed to be the process. This is how it is supposed to be. You're not doing something wrong because you have feelings. You are allowed to look at the challenges ahead of you, or even just something like, oh, I had really imagined that I would share my love of writing with my child. I love writing so much. I've written books and I continue to write books, and it's such a big passion of mine. And my kid's dyslexic and they despise writing. You're allowed to grieve that. When human beings, part of our sense of safety is our ability to predict the future. Perfectly, obviously not. Even just in tiny little short bursts. I predict that for dinner we're going to have Korean beef tonight. You know why? Because I'm making it. So I know that to be true. But that provides a certain level of comfort. If that was my expectation, and then I got downstairs and the beef was gone, for whatever reason, my husband left it out on the counter, right? I would have a moment of like dysregulation, of discordance. Like, no, this is the plan. What the is that? That's not the plan. Now I'm an adult, and I would pretty quickly move into problem solving and solve that problem, move on. But some things that we find out, they're big things. We're allowed to feel about them. Doesn't mean any of the negative labels that you worry it means. It means you're a human. You're allowed to be a human. But I encourage you to question the guilt. If the guilt is appropriate, then it has to be tied with a very specific action you took or failed to take. That as soon as I added that, it messed up my language. A specific action you took that was not aligned with your values, right? Or an action you didn't take, and the choice to not take that action was also not aligned with your values. It's much more wordy that way. If you can't answer that, then it's probably not really guilt. If it's shame, we do some inner critic work. What are you afraid of? This is speaking to the inner critic, that voice inside your head that was born of all of the criticisms you received as a child. What are you afraid of? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to protect me from? What's your goal? These are really important questions for the inner critic. Probably questions they've never been asked. A lot of times we have to journal on these things because there's not an immediate answer, which is fine. Journal about it. And whatever that is, whatever the answer is, okay, cool. There's other ways to reach that goal. You don't need to name call. You don't need to tell me that I'm the worst mom in the world. Okay, because I happen to know that I'm not. You don't need to tear me down to make me be aware of my kids' needs. Right? We can't know the things we don't know. Once we know them, then we're aware of them. That's how that works. There is no such thing as perfect. There is no such thing as being able to predict everything. Does it cause some dysregulation when our predictions fail? Yes, very much so. It's very distressing. Fair. That's when we get to grief. We don't have to turn to shame. What is wrong with you? Why didn't you know? You should have. No. Sometimes we just don't know. And then we do, and we make new choices with the information that we get. That's all we can do. And in the event that the guilt is appropriate, you still don't have to devolve into shame. Yeah, you yelled at your kid. That's not in alignment with your values. Fair enough. Given that we know that every person is doing the best they can, you're going to feel that guilt, and you're going to let that message sink in. You do not like yelling at your kids. What made it so that was your best option? You were not resourcing for yourself. You hadn't eaten. You're underslept. You're stressed about whatever it is. You're not voicing your needs. You need more support. Like, what are the things? There's a resourcing safety class on my member vault that talks about these 5 layers of safety. Any one of them falling apart can make your temper far shorter. Conversely, amplifying any one of the 5 layers of safety can help you soothe your nervous system and feel calmer and more regulated and more capable of taking on challenges and hard things. So the guilt is just a message. Whether it's accurate or not, it's still just a message. It's helping you to point you in the direction to be on your most aligned path. And that was the theme of today, so I thought I would share. I hope this resonates with you. If you need some support with mom guilt, you can DM me, or you can set up a free call at bit.ly/callsammy. The link is in the pinned post, wherever that is in this Facebook group. But I'm happy to help, and I believe you, and I believe in you. Don't forget it. I'll talk to you later. Bye.